She thought firing him was just another decision, another name crossed off a payroll list. But that night, when the city lights dimmed and her perfect world began to crumble, the same man she'd humiliated was the only one standing between her and something unthinkable. Fear replaced her pride, and for the first time, she saw the world through his eyes, through the pain she once ignored. What happened that night would not only save her life, it would expose the quiet cruelty that hides behind power, privilege, and polished glass doors. By day, Marianne Blake was everything a company could want in a leader: sharp, ambitious, and untouchable. At just 42, she was the youngest CEO in her firm's history, running her empire from a glass office that looked down on everyone else. Her life was measured in deadlines, profits, and power. She spoke softly but struck hard, especially when someone didn't meet her standards. Down in the basement level of that same building, David Carter pushed his mop through silent hallways. Most people didn't know his name. They just stepped around him as if he were invisible. Yet he noticed everything: how people looked through him, how they laughed when they thought he couldn't hear. That Friday morning, the tension between their two worlds collided. A spilled cup of coffee, a missed schedule, and a single harsh decision. Marianne fired David in front of a crowd, her tone sharp and cold, her words final. To her, it was just another inconvenience removed. To him, it was another reminder that no matter how hard he worked, some people would never see beyond the color of his skin. But what neither of them knew was that by nightfall, their roles would reverse, and the woman who looked down on him would be the one begging for mercy. That evening, the city hummed under the weight of a brewing storm. Marianne left the office late, heels clicking against marble floors that echoed her authority. The building was nearly empty, just the dull hum of lights and the faint smell of cleaning supplies lingering in the air. Somewhere below, the janitorial crew finished their shift. David was gone now, fired, dismissed, forgotten, or so she thought. Outside, rain started to fall in hard, slanted sheets. Marianne gripped her designer coat tighter as she hurried toward the parking garage. The security lights flickered, casting uneven shadows across the concrete. Her phone buzzed, a meeting reminder she no longer cared about. Then, a sound. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, too close. She turned, her breath catching. A figure moved in the shadows, tall, dark, soaked from the rain. Her mind raced. For the first time in years, she felt something unfamiliar. Fear. She stepped back, clutching her bag, words caught in her throat. The echo of her own prejudice whispered louder than the storm. What if it's him? Her keys slipped from trembling fingers, clattering across the floor. The man stepped forward and the light hit his face. It wasn't David, just another man, passing by. But the panic stayed, tightening her chest. She rushed to her car, locked the doors, and tried to breathe. As she drove out, the storm worsened. Streets flooded, lights failed, and the city fell into chaos. Then came the flash, a blur of headlights, a screech of tires, metal twisting against concrete. Her car spun out of control, slammed against a barrier, and the world went dark. When she opened her eyes, everything was sideways. Smoke, rain, pain. She tried to move, but the door was jammed. Panic turned to terror as flames began to curl from the hood. She screamed, but the storm swallowed her voice. Then through the haze, she saw someone running toward her. A figure in a soaked janitor's uniform, face streaked with rain and soot. David, the man she'd fired that morning. For a second, disbelief froze them both. Then he moved, ripping at the door, coughing through the smoke, risking everything for the woman who hadn't even said his name right. He didn't hesitate, didn't stop to think about the humiliation, the injustice, The sting of her words hours earlier. He just acted. Behind them, another explosion sent flames leaping higher. David shouted something she couldn't hear, pulled with everything he had, and the door gave way. Marianne fell into his arms, choking, trembling, the rain washing ash from her face. As sirens wailed in the distance, she looked up at him, soaked, shaking, exhausted. The man she dismissed as invisible had just saved her life. And in that moment, under the burning sky, the line between them and us blurred into something painfully human. But the night wasn't over, and the world wasn't done testing what either of them truly believed about mercy, power, and worth. The sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue against the smoke-filled night. Marianne sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket, trembling not from the cold, but from everything she could no longer hide behind. The paramedics moved fast, but the police were faster. One officer pointed toward David, still catching his breath near the wreck. "Is he bothering you, ma'am?" the officer shouted, hand hovering near his weapon. Marianne opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her voice was buried under years of quiet bias, the kind that smiled in meetings, that spoke about diversity while clutching her purse tighter in the elevator. She saw the way the officer's gaze hardened on David, the same look she'd given him that morning. A look that said, "You don't belong here." David lifted his hands slowly, confusion and exhaustion written across his face. He had just saved her life, and now, in front of flashing lights and pointing guns, his own life was being questioned. One wrong move, one misunderstood gesture, and everything could end. Marianne's heart pounded as the officer shouted again, stepping closer. The image burned into her memory, the same scene she'd scrolled past in the news, shaking her head, thinking it would never happen here. But it was happening, right in front of her, because of her silence. Finally, her voice broke through the fear. "Stop! He saved me!" she cried, her words slicing through the chaos. The officers froze, glancing between them. David stood motionless, rain dripping from his face, his hands still raised high. For a long, breathless second, no one moved. Then one of the officers lowered his hand, muttering something under his breath as they backed away. The danger passed, but the shame remained heavy, suffocating, undeniable. As the paramedics guided Marianne toward the ambulance, she looked back at David. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange, everything she thought she knew about power, privilege, and worth shattered like the glass of her burned-out car. The night had taken everything she built to protect herself and left her face to face with the truth she'd spent her life avoiding. In the days that followed, the story spread across the city. CEO saved by former employee. Headlines praised the irony, but none captured the truth. For Marianne, it wasn't a miracle story. It was a reckoning. The boardroom she once ruled now felt smaller, quieter. Every reflection in the glass walls showed a woman she barely recognized, one who had built success on blind spots she refused to see. She reached out to David more than once, not for an apology that could erase the past, but for understanding. Yet he didn't want recognition or pity. He just wanted dignity, the kind that should have never been taken from him in the first place. Still, his calm acceptance left her shaken. It wasn't his forgiveness that haunted her, it was his grace. Weeks turned into months, and Marianne began to listen more than she spoke. She used her platform to challenge the system she once benefited from, to change hiring practices, to make space for voices like David's. But even as she tried to do better, she knew this story wasn't about redemption. It was about awakening. Because for every David who is finally seen, there are countless others still fighting to be acknowledged. For every injustice caught on camera, there are thousands that go unseen, unheard, unnamed. The fire that night didn't just destroy a car, it burned through the illusion that power equals worth, It exposed what too many pretend not to see, that racism isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, hidden behind smiles and corporate glass. And maybe that's the most dangerous kind of all. So, when the next moment comes, the next chance to look beyond fear, to see someone's humanity, what will you do?